We're going to talk about taurine and heart disease. I was going to do TB, and then I decided to switch to taurine partly because I had not finished the other presentation. So this is a very hot topic right now, and hopefully some of this will be a review. It'll be fairly quick, and hopefully we'll have some questions. So you guys remember from back in February when I made the analogy that the heart is basically like a bilge pump? Remembering that the electrical current that goes in to run the pump is like the electrical system of the heart, that the actual mechanics and force that the pump works is like the heart muscle when it beats, and then there are a bunch of valves, right? There's water coming in on the pump and water coming out, and think of that again as blood coming in and out through various passages and valves. Very quickly again, the heart is basically a box. The atria are on the top. The ventricles are on the bottom. The right side gets blood from all over the body. It doesn't have oxygen, right? They pump it to the lungs. It comes in the right atrium. The right ventricle, which is kind of not very strong, pumps it to the lungs because the lungs are a low pressure system. The blood comes back from the lungs full of happy oxygen into the left atrium. Then it goes in the left ventricle, and the left ventricle is the business end, right? That's the pump, and the side that pumps it everywhere in the body. So just very quickly on that. So a little bit better diagram. And by convention, don't ask me why, we tend to put the right side of the heart, as you're looking at it, it's left. Left side of the heart is right because you're thinking of somebody laying like this. And again, just kind of a neater diagram telling what's going on. So remembering that we have all these parts to the heart, we're not going to go back over everything that the heart does, but cardiomyopathies are contractility problems, which means how hard the heart is pumping, right? It's the muscle, how the force, it's like the pump. What's the force, what's the horsepower of the pump? And dilated cardiomyopathy, and we'll talk a little bit about it, is a type of heart muscle problem. So you remember we talked a little bit about cardiomyopathies. You can have all kinds of diseases in your heart, right? You can have diseases of the electrical system, that's an arrhythmia. You can have diseases of the valves, and lots of people have those, right? Leaky valves. And you can have diseases of the muscle, that is how hard your heart pumps. And dilated cardiomyopathy, which will become important because that's the type of heart problem that develops with taurine deficiency, is just, again, a type of muscle problem. So we're going to show some cool videos. This is a cross-section through a heart. This is the left ventricle, right, the business end. This is an echocardiogram. You're going to see it move. Pay attention. So remember, this is the muscle. These are the valves moving. And you could see like the heart's beating. The next one, first thing I want you to see is, see how big this chamber looks? This is a dog with dilated cardiomyopathy. And if you notice the walls, this is the wall actually separating the two chambers. Again, this is the left ventricle. Watch what happens here when we look at it. Do you get the idea? It ain't pumping very well, right? Blood's just sitting there and it's not moving very well. So that's the problem with dilated cardiomyopathy. Your heart dilates, the muscle's not pumping very well, and so you're not pumping blood to all the parts of your body. Eventually, your heart will compensate, and then it'll start failing. And that's when these guys start showing clinical signs of having heart disease. So what about taurine? What do we know about it? Well, we've known about taurine for a really long time, but the groundbreaking discovery was in 1987 when Dr. Paul Payan discovered, and this is actually a picture of one of the cats from his study with two different color eyes that somebody took, and this was the cover of Science magazine, which is like a huge international magazine. So this was myocardial failure in cats associated with low plasma taurine, and it was reversible. We used to see dilated cardiomyopathy in cats. I never see it anymore. I mean, it just went away. This was recognized. Taurine was added to all cat diets, so they're all supplemented now. And this disease essentially went away. And that's what was so groundbreaking. It was one of the first demonstrations of a nutritional deficiency that was reversible and led to heart disease. What was the year again? 1987. So quite a long time ago. So what do we know? What is taurine? That's a little diagram of taurine. It's an amino acid, right? We know amino acids are the building blocks of protein. It was known for a long time. It's an essential nutrient for cats. And if you guys remember, cats are obligate carnivores, right? They have to eat high protein because they don't make it themselves. And maybe primates, which include us. And it was associated, deficiency was associated with eye problems because one of the highest concentrations is in our retinas. And every once in a while in a cat that's eating a weird diet, we can see retinal degeneration from taurine deficiency. But again, that was another disease that we just do not see very frequently. And until Paul Pion's discovery, that's what people thought, oh, taurine deficient, they get this eye stuff, but never associated with heart disease. So this is a big deal. And what it did is it set off a flurry of, oh, taurine, dogs, maybe dogs with dilated cardiomyopathy, which is really common, have taurine deficiency. So before we get into it, what do we know about dilated cardiomyopathy? What breed? Doberman Pinscher. And this is astounding. So dilated cardiomyopathy, 1/3 to half of all Dobermans will develop this disease. It is entrenched in the breed. It's really common. It's more common in males, so males are more at the 50%, females 33%. And these are stats from a pretty recent textbook, so I think they still hold. 25% Irish Wolfhounds. Great Danes are another one of the classic breeds, so really big dogs, right? They tend to be diagnosed in middle age. Boxers also get dilated cardiomyopathy, but they get a kind of a different form of it. And it's also seen in juvenile Portuguese water dogs. So we know that certain breeds have it. We know that it's inherited, obviously, because lots of it runs in families. Dr. Kate Muirs, our good friend at NC State, has done a lot of work trying to identify the genes behind this. And so this was like the mantra for years. When taurine was discovered, everybody measured taurine and dilated in Doberman Pinschers, and unfortunately they're not taurine deficient. So people looked in dogs. There's another amino acid called carnitine, and people did sometimes supplement taurine and carnitine. There was maybe some evidence that carnitine could be deficient, but it was never a nice clean story like in cats. So it kind of went away. People didn't think of it like, okay, well, bummer. You know, we can cure cats of the disease. We can't cure dogs, and we're back to square one. You know, these dogs get dilated cardiomyopathy. It's probably inherited, etc. So that was the taurine story for a really, really long time. Now, there are Cocker Spaniels that do develop dilated cardiomyopathy, and they're one breed that do seem to have a taurine responsive dilated cardiomyopathy. So people found that and we'll go, okay, so in Cocker Spaniels, if they develop the disease, we should measure taurine levels and supplement their food. And it was rare in other breeds. But every once in a while, again, somebody would say, oh, this is kind of an unusual breed to develop DCM, we're going to measure taurine levels. And that's important because that's what set the current problem in motion. So a few years ago, people started to notice an uptick in dogs, unusual dog breeds, schnauzers, shih tzus, little breeds of dogs, weird, getting dilated cardiomyopathy. And people started to say, well, why is this happening? When that happened, some people started measuring taurine and some found them to be low. I thought, well, that's even stranger. It got more, right? We started seeing golden retrievers with dilated cardiomyopathy. And even though they're a large breed dog, they didn't seem to get it very frequently. And what people started to say is it looks like it's associated with a grain-free, feeding of a grain-free diet. And so taurine, grain-free diet, if you develop heart disease, people started looking for it. They identified low taurine. However, there was an abstract, which I have and can give you guys, that was just presented at ACBIM, which looked at all these dogs diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy at NC State. And what they found were a lot of them had totally normal taurine levels. However, they did implicate a grain-free diet. So what's the bottom line with this? Now, I talked with Dr. Josh Stern. He's a doctor who has a dog in the study. He's a cardiologist, and this is one of his research interests. And he's been measuring taurine for a few years since this started to crop up more and more and more in golden retrievers in particular. There's a lot of buzz on our Facebook page. And what I think I have right now is developed a few talking points for us about taurine deficiency and cardiomyopathy Josh is preparing a manuscript that he's hoping to submit in the next week or two. That's really the results of his research, looking very carefully at this. And he's going to probably implicate some different diets that are quite popular in, that seem to be a particular problem. But what we can say for sure is that dilated cardiomyopathy has been identified in several breeds that don't develop this heart disease, including Goldens. Okay, they are, again, large breed dog, but not ones I typically think of getting DCM. Their heart disease is different. They get subaortic stenosis, doesn't look anything like this. So very, very different. And although low taurine levels have been noted in dogs with DCM, there's mounting data that taurine levels are often normal in dogs who develop the disease. So the problem is probably a little stickier than we know. It could come down to taurine and that maybe it's not available or what, but this is a confusing point because at first they thought it was taurine. The key commonality, though, is the feeding of grain-free diets. And we'll probably learn in the next couple weeks if Josh's thing gets published, which I think it will be very controversial, but they'll probably find some diets. I would suspect it'll be like cats, which is people just start adding taurine to the diets. And you can supplement orally. What is unknown right now is how long it takes for the disease to develop. Like, do you have to be taurine deficient for a month, a year, 6 months, 2 years? Nobody knows. And that comes into the next point, which is a single measurement of taurine levels, which may be useful. I mean, if you have heart disease, a dog with dilated cardiomyopathy, you're going to measure taurine. But just taking one, like I think a lot of our golden retriever lifetime study people are asking, well, can I go and get one done? Should you add it to the panel? May not make any difference, right? Because we don't know how long it takes to develop. So and the other problem would be one normal level doesn't mean your dog could be protected or that won't get the disease. And I think that's really important to emphasize with people that may not, it's not going to guarantee. It's like ultrasounding a spleen in a dog. Like we know Goldens get hemangiosarcoma. I've seen it develop within 6 weeks from a clean ultrasound to a dog bleeding out. So, I mean, unless you're going to pop a probe on your dog every few days, it's probably not worth, a once a year test like a lot of our Goldens going in right now. However, and obviously always work with your family veterinarian regarding how to measure levels. Now this is what Josh told me. They're a little bit tricky to draw. They have to be handled in a certain way. And the problem is if they're not handled properly, and in particular the red cells break apart, the way they measure taurine, it can artificially elevate the levels, which could mean your dog could look normal when they're deficient. Okay, so if the samples aren't handled properly, they need special processing. There's only 2 laboratories right now in the country that are doing this. One is at UC Davis, obviously. That's where Josh works in conjunction with that lab. And one is at the University of Wisconsin. If you send blood in through your normal labs like Antec and IDEX and those guys, they forward it on. But again, what Josh said is, well, it can be tricky and then it's problematic, you know what I mean, when you get the samples. And there are pricey tests as well. So you want to handle the samples properly. However, if I had a dog that looks like it's developing heart disease, I would absolutely have my veterinarian send off a taurine level. Moving off a grain-free diet is recommended, but should be done in consultation with your vet. I think a lot of us have dogs on grain-free diets for allergies. I know that my dog for a long time was on, both of my Labradors were on grain-free diets for allergies. So again, it's something that you need to do in conjunction with your veterinarian. And owners who have dogs who develop this disease should report it as an adverse event to the FDA. And this is what it looks like. This is a screenshot. It's really simple. You go to the FDA pet food adverse event and it'll walk you through what you need to do. The FDA instituted a warning, but again, this is super helpful, right? To report particular, even though you don't want to get people in trouble, it's a good way, some certain diets need to be pinpointed and then they'll come out with a statement. So that was Josh's suggestion. He's telling people to go ahead and report it. So what else? We had two things. We also have a blog from last year that a lot of the data is still pertinent. It's one where I interviewed Josh, and it is on our website. It's easy if you type in website, or on our website, if you type in taurine, it's the first thing that comes up. So it's really easy to tell people, go to our website, type in taurine, and you'll find this blog. And it links, you can point them to Josh's website, but within the blog, there are links to Josh's website. And he's running a genetics lab, so this isn't the only thing that he does, but he does a lot of it. He's going to be at the specialty again this year, for the golden retrievers, drawing blood samples while he's there and talking to people. And I think he did it for free last year. I don't know if he's doing it for free this year, but it's nice because he's actually there with Dr. Frasetti. And it's her lab that does the taurine levels at Davis. So it'll be collected properly and processed properly because both of them will be there. So that's also an option for people. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. I think that there's a lot more dogs developing this problem. We're seeing it a lot more. I think Annie can attest to, there's a lot of buzz on the Facebook page. People are getting worried, though it's been around rumbling within at least the golden retriever community for probably a couple years now, and it's reaching a head. And I don't know what's going to happen. For many, many years, I've used grain-free diets in hypoallergenic dogs and never saw DCM. I'm not sure why the uptick, but it's changed. It seems to have changed. And he also, one thing that Dr. Stern said is sometimes the boutique brands and homemade diets may be part of this problem as well. Yes, Christy.
What kind of symptoms do we see in the dogs?
Good question. So what do dogs with dilated cardiomyopathy? They look like a lot of dogs with heart disease in general. So they'll get tired more easily. So that's one of the first signs. We call it exercise intolerance, but it's like, man, they're huffing and puffing. They used to be able to climb a set of stairs. They can't anymore. So that's one of the things. If you guys remember when Toby was here and she brought Lloyd in, the gums can get really pale because their blood isn't pumping very well. When they go into failure, they can breathe harder. They can cough a little bit if fluid starts to build up in their lungs. But dilated cardiomyopathy, remember the diagram of the right and the left side of the heart, tends to be a right-sided failure problem. And when right-sided failure happens, remember where the blood's coming from, all the other parts of the body. So it's not that the lungs always build up fluid, it's that they'll get fluid like in their abdomen. If you've ever heard of dropsy in people, it's an old term for heart failure. They'll get fluid in their abdomen, so they can get kind of pendulous abdomens. They can get swelling of their extremities. Their pulses are really fast and weak, so you can't, which is hard for people to tell, but mostly they see lethargy. They'll be like, geez, the dog's getting really fat, what's going on? I mean, I've had people come in knowing that their dog had some fluid in the abdomen because all of a sudden it got kind of pot-bellied looking. And sometimes coughing as it gets even more advanced. Sometimes the heart can get big and push on the airways and cause coughing as well. And then they just start feeling lousy, right? But it's hard for people to usually tell when their gums get pale. But sometimes, they'll open their mouth to pant and they'll be like, geez, that is really that tongue doesn't look pink anymore. But those are the most common signs of this particular form of heart disease. So we've had a couple dogs in the study that have been diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy secondary to taurine. We had a dog die suddenly last week who had DCM, no question, whose taurine levels were normal at the time that the dog died. So again, you could say, well, is it a lab problem? Is it a processing problem? Or is it one of those dogs that just has normal levels? And so again, hanging your hat on a low taurine level is not necessarily maybe absolutely linked to DCM. I don't think people have teased it out, but certainly it is reversible to a certain degree if caught. Not all dogs reverse. Some of them have permanent heart problems, and some of them, if you can get them out of failure, can do okay. So it is a potentially reversible problem. But yes.
So
Are there
Elizabeth.
hypoallergenic foods that have grain or would be good?
I mean, there's been for years hypoallergenic diets, but I want to say, but they're by prescription. So all the prescription hypoallergenic diets are more expensive, but I fed them for years and never saw DCM. And so I think the question that people are talking about, is it the processing? Is it boutique diets? Is it, but it's not, according to Josh, he won't tell me the names of some of the diets, but he said they're big players. So it's not just, you know, your local store that's making a boutique diet. It seems to be some bigger companies as well. And I don't think they understand why, but then the fact that, you know, it's not taurine. Like I said, I never saw it unless we were missing them for years and years, but there are an awful lot of dogs on hypoallergenic diets. You know, there's the rabbit and pea and duck and potato, and my dog ate kangaroo and oatmeal, though I guess oatmeal would be kind of a grain, but right? But there's sweet potato based ones, and they're certainly grain free, and we fed them for years. So I gotta think there's, I don't know if it's in the processing or how the grain is, you know, somebody suggested maybe it's in the how they're processed and brought together, what they're using as a filler instead of, like, is it actually binding taurine? So it's just not available, and there's plenty in the diet, but it's just not, the dogs can't process it. Is it a genetic? That was what was thought first, was that, well, if you're grain free and you're a golden with a certain genetic makeup, that's a bad combination, but that doesn't explain the schnauzers and all the stuff that just came out of NC State, where the taurine was normal. So it seems more complicated. Yeah,
How close
Caitlin.
are we to understanding the binding issues and like?
Not close yet, right? And I think people were thinking, oh, it's going to be taurine. It's going to be nice and easy, and it's taurine related, and it's related to, I heard it was maybe diet processing, what they were filling in with, the protein used. But then when all these other dogs have normal taurine levels but are still developing the disease, I think a lot of people are like, well, now we not quite sure what's going on. Yes.
Do we know anything yet regarding raw food diet implications in association with this?
Raw food has been implicated because of the, it depends again, because some of those are more homemade. But I think it is, but raw food has fallen sort of into this category, right? Because it tends to be grain free. However, that's again, not like just raw food. These dogs are just eating raw food. It's not. It's dogs not eating raw food. Yes, Christy.
What does Dr. Stern feed his dog?
I don't know. Probably not a grain-free diet, though. Either that or he's giving taurine. You can supplement taurine, and really what I suspect is this is going to fall like the cat foods, which all have like so much taurine you can't even believe it. But it doesn't seem to be toxic in any, but I wouldn't also like encourage people to just pop their dogs taurine supplements from GNC. Don't do that.
Plus we don't know.
And we don't really know, because again, taurine doesn't seem to fix it for all dogs. But I think they'll tease it out. But in the meantime, the diets will go off. So if you guys remember the melamine problem a few years ago in cats with renal failure, a lot of those just disappeared till people figured it out. And I think that's the idea, again, not to point fingers, is Josh wanted to be very, very careful before he went public and said, here's the diets, right? Because they'll probably go off the market for a while till everything gets sorted out. I mean, I bet you grain-free diets or something will come back as soon as people figure out, well, what was that combination that was particularly problematic. But anyway, that's all that I know right now. Again, it's really odd. Like I said, while I was around, I'm old enough to remember the cats. And so I remember everybody trying to find the same thing in dogs and never showing that taurine made a difference for most dogs, except for, like I said, Cocker Spaniels, which are pretty far away on the evolutionary tree, right, from Golden Retrievers. So they're quite different.
Do you know if there have been any studies or research into taurine levels in humans? And how that
Yes, and it's not clean either. Because everybody got really excited with the cats and said, oh, let's look at taurine people. And no, unfortunately, it's never panned out as nicely as cats. And I'm not even sure I know all the reasons. I'd have to ask Dr. Payan next time I see him how he found it, like how they tripped over it. I can't remember, but it was pretty interesting. So, all right, cool, you guys. Well, thanks. Yay!